Taoiseach, I suppose going back to 1962 and that seminal document, Investment in Education, and the opening of the first regional technical colleges in 1970, it's fair to say that our institutes of technology have been a linchpin of Ireland's economic and social development. They have provided thousands of graduates to industries across the regions and in Dublin, in the life sciences, medtech and pharma, in the retail management, culinary skills, tourism sector, in technology and indeed in the professions. Now, a recent report by the Higher Education Authority, a very comprehensive and substantive report into the financial capacity of the institutes, provides very stark reading indeed, and once again highlights the absolute necessity and imperative of investing in third-level education and in a critical aspect of our infrastructure, which is key to future jobs and particularly attracting inward investment and creating the raw material and the graduates for our own indigenous enterprises. And basically, they are saying that the sector is on its knees financially. There has been a 34% reduction in state funding since 2008. There has been a 24% increase in the number of students attending. Capital funding since 2012 is down by a whopping 49%. Extraordinary figures. Staffing levels are down 12%. There's an immediate cash flow crisis. 10 out of the 14 colleges are experiencing particular challenges, according to the report. And the sector on aggregate is in deficit right now and will be in deficit for the next 5 years. And there's a continuing, ongoing major deficit in capital maintenance and renewal. And then, strikingly, science and engineering and the STEM subjects within the institutes, by the HEA's own admission, has been disincentivised by the model of funding. Now, this is going on for years, Taoiseach, and people have been asleep at the wheel in terms of this sector and its capacity to contribute to our economy. Substantial capital investment is required, it says, immediately to meet the additional quality physical space needs. And in terms of ICT and science, it particularly identified those as areas where inroads could be made if the necessary provision in funding was actually made, and it would reinforce the technological mission of these colleges. Now, Taoiseach, the budget was a missed opportunity. I mean, Cassell's did spell out the university sector and the IoT sector. And for the future of this country, it is critical that the government get to grips with this. And I'm asking you, Taoiseach, in essence, what is the government's plan to deal with the crippling financial situation that our institutes of technology currently find themselves in? And how do you propose to create a new pathway for these institutes in the months ahead?
Thank you, Deputy Martin. Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy Martin. Well, I think it's fair to say that a central plank of all governments over the years has been the third-level sector. And we have always prided ourselves on the quality of the young people that emerge from both universities and ITs, and that in the context of the case that is continuously made by Ireland for continued foreign direct investment into the country here. And of course, ITs have always been a little more flexible than universities in the way that they can both lead and react to changing demographics and the need for new kinds of skills. But you've also put your finger, you see, on a question that's just broader than this particular problem, because the need for capital investment spreads right across a whole series of sectors. And given the perilous state of the finances for a number of years, and the fact that we're now in a somewhat better place than before, but now face a whole series of challenges, including the need for capital expenditure for the building of infrastructure across the country, is a case that this House will have to face and discuss in the time ahead. Obviously, there's an investment of £36.5 million going into the third-level sector next year, and £160 million over the next 3 years. And that's the first significant investment in the sector in 9 years at Cancorla, a period in which state investment in higher education fell by £463 million, or 33%. So the allocation being made by Minister Bruton will actually allow for the first time to keep pace with demographic increases, and also to introduce targeted initiatives, in particular in disadvantaged areas, skills, research, flexible learning, with thousands of students benefiting under each heading. And secondly, to build on that initial investment, the work has now started on a new mechanism aimed at allowing government to put in place a comprehensive multi-annual spending plan for the sector. And both Minister Donoghue and Minister Bruton are working on putting in place that appropriate multi-annual funding model for higher education and further education from 2018, in which all of the beneficiaries of the third level sector can play a role. And I would expect Minister Bruton to bring that proposition to government by the middle of next year on this. And thirdly, the proposals need to be examined that can add to those two elements and put in place a sustainable plan for funding Cancora that can deliver a third-level system that can be world-class for both the medium and the longer term. And earlier this year, Minister Bruton published the Cassell's report. I've already said we need to debate that in the House here. And as committed to in the programme for government, that report is now currently with the Oireachtas Committee. And that's an area where you need broad consensus is needed on the future direction, and Minister Bruton is working on to build that consensus. It's accepted, of course, that there's a need for investment in capital infrastructure here. Some ITs have managed even with the difficulties that they've had. Others haven't, and the deficit is there for all to see in the reports that they've published. But obviously I can give you the details of how it's proposed to spend the 36.5 million in 2017. And let me repeat again, Cancora, that that's the first significant investment for 9 years in the third level sector.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Martin.
Taoiseach, I'm not convinced at all by your reply. And I think this is about strategic direction and how we should take the country. Because back in the 60s, the likes of Donogh O'Malley, Paddy Hillary and Sean Lemass had a vision about how to take the country. And that's why they set up the regional technical colleges. And their impact was extraordinary for its time. And I was at an event last week between the Dublin Chamber of Commerce and the Cork Chamber of Commerce, and they were honouring a man by the name of Dick Lehan, who was one of the first employees of EMC in Cork. And who was at his table? Who did he invite as guests? Personnel from the old Cork Regional Technical College, Larry Poland, and Professor Noel Mulcahy from University of Limerick, underlining the central importance that they had to the growth of EMC, which now employs thousands of people in the country and have for many, many years. And that strategic direction is lacking, and it was lacking in the budget, Taoiseach, as well, in relation to this sector. And the reports are there. And I think it's quite extraordinary that the Higher Education Authority, in its own report, would use a phrase like, and I quote, STEM provision has effectively been disincentivised in the IoT sector.
Thank you, Deputy Martin.
That's the technology sector. They're not incentivised to provide courses in information communication technologies, in engineering, in science. That's an extraordinary position and a terrible indictment on the last number of years by the respective ministers who were in charge of education to allow that to continue. And Taoiseach, it's clear that 6 of the institutes, according to the report, face immediately sustainability challenges, 6, and 4 more potentially at risk due to limited reserves. So this is by the HEA, which is an agency of the state, saying it's in a critical crisis situation.
Thank you,
and I get no sense that the government grasps that or is going to deal with it in a comprehensive and substantive way.
Taoiseach.
Do get it, and the government understand what needs to be done here. But I'd point out to you again, as I have done before, that you are an esteemed Minister for Education yourself. But the fact of the matter is that the taxpayers of this country were left with a €64 billion debt to pay back banks after the catastrophic management of the economy. That's fact, and we're emerging from that. And the IoT review, as you're well aware, was based on an expectation of a static exchequer contribution, and that's not what Minister Bruton intends to follow through with. If I could refer you to what Minister Donoghue said in his speech on the budget here, he said that ensuring that education remains the linchpin of our economic success requires an intensified focus on a sustainable, long-term funding model for the entire higher and further education sector. I am committed to this goal and to building on the significant investment in education and I am announcing for 2017. And he went on to say, Minister for Education and Skills and I are therefore initiating a consultation process on the design and operation of an exchequer employer investment mechanism to operate from 2018 onwards.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
This is also intended to help drive reform, quality and performance improvement across the higher and the further education sector in line with the objectives of the Action Plan on Education. So Government are not in a position to do everything that one would like. There's almost a 40 million investment this year for the first time in 9 years, and clearly both Minister for Public Expenditure and Minister for Education have a clear plan as to how this should be dealt with. We have to discuss the outcome of Cassell's, and Minister would expect to bring his proposition for longer-term sustainable funding of the entire third-level sector to Government by mid-next year.